All right. Let's go ahead and get started here. I just want to start by saying thank you all for joining us tonight for our gifted support group. This is not what we originally had scheduled, but we're really fortunate to be able to have our president of IEA and co-founder of IEA with us tonight to answer your questions. I want to start by giving some information about Zoom. You're probably already aware of this. We've all been doing a lot of Zoom lately, but I just want to call a couple of things to your attention before we get started. First, you'll notice that this is a Q&A. We are eager to hear your questions. Some have been shared with us before tonight, so we'll be addressing those, but we're also going to be answering questions from the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There's a little dialog box or a little a search bar that you can use. There's a Q&A. You can enter questions there, or you can enter them in the chat. The chat is more dynamic. The chat, you can speak to all of us, including the other participants and attendees here tonight. You can single out IEA. You can single out an individual. If you put a question in there, please put it to everybody. We will be monitoring that and pulling questions out. Or if you have resources you want to share or comments you want to share, this is a great place to do that. I also want to point out that there is an option in here in the chat for you to raise your hand. If you click the button to raise your hand, that gives a little alert on my end. I'll know you have something that you want to add. I'm going to start with everybody muted. That's going to give us the best sound quality, and I might message you individually. So just be aware if you want to communicate with us, that's another option as well. So if you have any questions throughout, again, Q&A for questions, also chat if you want to talk to each other or other questions, all great to use. We're really happy to be here tonight and really encourage people to reach out to one another, and hopefully we'll find solutions to the questions we have. All right. So again, I'm going to start by introducing our guest tonight, who's going to be answering all of your questions. I'll be here to help moderate and bring those questions up as they fit into the dialogue. So Miss Betsy Smith, will you please take it away?
Hi. So as many of you know, I'm Betsy Jones. I'm president of the Institute for Educational Advancement. And this is a new format for all of us, so please be patient and kind as we're talking about kindness and the way we deal with our gifted children, who right now are probably dealing with many challenges, as we all are. We're in a very unique situation right now in our world where, for the first time, I think we all agree on one enemy, and this is the time for us all to pull together. And this is the time for our young, bright minds to help us do that and help us be patient as well. One of the things that we can give our children is the ability to enable them to grow up with consciousness, with the understanding of their own needs and empathy for others, a healthy understanding of kindness, and the inner peace that comes from giving. These aspects of learning assist us in developing and maintaining our well-being. And right now, our well-being is challenged in so many different directions. But with the help of others around us, I have a wonderful team at IEA who's doing a great job of supporting each other and the kids that we serve. We can get through this, and we can get through with our little ones too. We're now asked to do all this, though, while adapting to this huge change. And this consequence, which is a huge, significant consequence, and means so much to our society and our world, it can be extremely challenging and overwhelming. So how do we reframe the picture? How do we see the situation differently? What about our current human condition can we replace with the fear to hope, real hope? And we know our gifted young people ask for real hope. What are the real things that are happening? We know the challenges. And there are good things happening. There are vaccinations that are being discovered. There are states that are opening. There are things that are occurring to give us that kind of hope. And we know it'll be a new, different place when we open up. But that's another reason for us to talk tonight. How do we help our kids reframe themselves from going to what may be a very safe home environment for them now, back out into the world, which is going to be a little more challenging? So many questions, and maybe together we can come up with some answers. So here we are, reframing ourselves with a new narrative, hopefully doing it together in a collective space, and what we could do for our gifted young people. One of the things I wanted to start with is to kind of frame what we do at IEA in the sense of what is the definition of gifted that we use, which will help us in talking about gifted children. We choose to use the definition, which is the Columbus Group definition of gifted. And as you know, there are so many different definitions of gifted out there. This is just one, but it's the one we choose to use because it really does help frame the discussion of the social emotional needs of gifted young people, as well as the immense needs of their intellect. So I'm going to try this and we'll see if we can get this to work. So this is the definition that we use for gifted, and it is by the Columbus Group. And this definition talks about asynchronous development. So giftedness as asynchronous development advances cognitive abilities, their heightened intensities, and it does tell us how different they are from the norm. All of these things are what separates our young people from other kids. All of these children now are in a place of challenge, but this helps us understand the uniqueness of the asynchronous development and the cognitive issues that these young people have. So I wanted to start with that just to give you an indication of what we think of when we talk about gifted young people. So that's kind of where I wanted to start off, give you guys a chance to ask some questions. Hopefully we can come up with some answers together, and I'll do my very best to enlighten you on some of the things that I know, and hopefully you can share with us some of the things you know. Again, I'm grateful that you're joining us tonight at beautiful evening in Southern California, and hopefully wherever you are too.
Thank you, Betsy. I want to start by addressing a couple of questions that I already see coming in through Q&A and the chat, and it's really about who we are as an organization. Who does IEA serve? One question is specifically about what kind of schools we work with, and another question is about a young 16-year-old who just recently found out she was gifted, and the parent is wondering what IEA can offer to them. Can you speak to both of those for us?
Sure. So the Institute for Educational Advancement is a nonprofit organization that is geared to serving the needs of gifted and highly gifted children. What makes us unique is the fact that we really do work with the whole child, the mind, body, spirit, social, emotional needs of young people. And we do that through a variety of different services. We start with consulting our young guys. We've had young people in my office that are 18, 19 months old, all the way up to 18 years old. So we have consulting services. And then we have programs for young people who are 4 years old up to 14, 15, and that's our academy program. And our academy program is a program that is basically built in community normally, but right now we're doing it online as everyone else is, and we're experiencing that as a new normal for us, and learning quite a bit. But that's a space, a safe space for our young people to be able to delve into deep content in wonderful experiences with content area specialists, and also develop relationships with one another to develop that social emotional ability. We also have programs for our middle school and high school students called our labs program, which right now we're running virtually as well, but neat experiences for those young people who want to really delve into a subject or a content area for just maybe 2 or 3 hours in a given day. For our high school students, we have one of the largest scholarship programs in the country, and that's the Carolyn D. Bradley Scholarship Program. And that program is for 7th graders who are gifted, and it's an initiative where they apply in their 7th grade year, and then we spend that summer identifying those young people, and then in their 8th grade year we help them identify the most appropriate learning environment for them. And as you know, it's different for every child. There's no one right school, so a lot of that time is spent in looking at that individual child. So we also have one of the most unique experiences too for our kids, which is a summer camp. It's a sleepaway camp, and basically UNASA, which is the Lakota word for balance, is just that. It's a summer experience where we deal with things where children expand their intellect by stretching their mind in ways they're not used to stretching it, not book learning, but in different kinds of learning from each other. And we're fortunate to have some of the most eminent people in the field of gifted education with us there as our senior fellows. And they help us stretch our minds and learn new things. And we not only stretch our minds, we stretch our bodies through yoga and Tai Chi. We do a lot of calming exercises and things that really help us understand how our mind and body is connected and the consciousness of being connected to each other and the importance of that. It's a wonderful community building experience. And this year, for the first time, we're also doing our very first virtual UNASA, which will happen for about 4 or 5 days during our traditional UNASA West experience. That particular program we offer for 2 different times in the summertime. We are hoping, as many people are, that we will be up and running with our camp in Michigan in late July, early August. Those are some of the programs that we offer. We also have a lot of individual consulting. We support teacher training. We have a wonderful resource center on our website that provides many more resources and connections to other organizations as well that could be helpful.
Thank you, Betsy. And just like IEA as an organization covers a lot of different territory related to giftedness, so will this conversation this evening. And I'd love to start with a question that comes out of our academy team. And the question is, how can parents really help their children manage anxieties? And I've seen a couple of questions that dance around this as well. It's particularly about students who are voracious readers, who are being exposed to things online. How can parents help research-heavy students contextualize and deal with what they're being exposed to?
A lot of this goes back to kind of reframing and talking about the positive. That's kind of a very broad question. Many of our young people have anxieties that we deal with in the sense of what we call overexcitabilities. And that is a theory of Dabrowski that we spend a great deal of time working with in all of our programs, of looking at what kinds of things our children are very intense about and how they see things. Gifted young people see the world differently. They feel it differently. They experience things differently. Everything's much more intense in what they're doing. And that's one of the reasons why we have to spend so much time in looking at how to calm the mind and relax one's feelings and breathe through what you're doing, breathe through how you're experiencing things. One of the things that I can show you is a slide on overexcitabilities that might be of interest to you all. I don't know if you can see this.
Great, I see that.
And this kind of talks about some of the ways that anxiety and intensities manifest themselves in our children. So one of them is a psychomotor kind of thing, which right now is very challenging for our kids in the sense of they're inside, they're kept at home right now. And so that ability to physically move and walk around is really, really challenging. So one of the things we talk about in this space is to make sure our kids do get outside and do have that exercise, do experience seeing things that are out and about. And again, that goes back to the yoga or Tai Chi or other ways of making sure they have that outlet physically. The other thing that we see in overexcitabilities is the sensual aspect of self. And that is just seeing things in a very different way, very sensual, how the lighting happens to be in a room, or enjoying music in a different way, which right now, again, is another way to help calm that mind is through music and different aspects of that kind of art. The theater, explaining those things in different ways, such as that. We know these kids have great imaginations, and this is the perfect time for them to use all of those imaginations. And it really is a way to help reduce some of that anxiety and stress. We have so many different video games that kids use, so pulling away from some of the negativeness of that, but to look at experiencing positive ways of doing things, building new games, building new ways of learning and being and connecting to one another. Finding friends that are like-minded that you can connect to online is a way to reduce some of that anxiety and stress as well, as long as the conversation is deep, but also thoughtful and positive as possible. Really looking at that intellectual, really analyzing what's happening right now. This is a very, very unique time in our entire world, in our history, and being able to document that, writing down what that feels like and looks like, and getting things out of our physical mind and our bodies onto paper or the computer. Hopefully paper is a little different than all the screen time that kids are doing right now, but really being able to push out some of those anxieties in a different venue is really important as well. And really looking at what is the science behind all this? What's happening? How can we discover new vaccinations, and what kinds of things are being done with the ventilators? All these things are fascinating ways for kids to really look at this in an intellectual perspective. But we can't forget that emotional side of these beautiful young people who have so many questions and are so distraught and feel things so deeply and are so concerned about others around them, globally, next door, anywhere, of what they're feeling and how they're going through this. So really it's letting them talk and listen, which is very challenging because we're also all having the same anxieties as well. Many gifted people have those anxieties. If you have a child who has them, the odds are that you have a parent that has them too. So being able to really understand and feel and be with them in that space, listen as best you can. One of the things these kids miss most is the feeling of being seen and being heard for who they are. And many of them don't have that group experience anymore. So they really rely on their families for that and to be with them in this space and to talk about what that feels like. Talk about what it's going to be like when this is over. Talk about what it feels like to be here now. Understanding that what you're getting from school may not be enough for you, and that could cause anxiety. You need to do what's best for you and not necessarily for your schoolwork.
Betsy, I have an example that's come up here in the Q&A. One of our parents has a son who's losing his temper when he doesn't get things right. For example, he can be playing soccer, and if the ball gets kicked a little further or out of range, that can cause some upset feelings. And then also it translates into his work with books and problems and math problems and games. He gets upset when he plays with his parents. And I'm wondering if you have anything, you mentioned listening to the student and making sure they're feeling heard. Are there more specific examples you might be able to give for this situation?
So some of that is pent up anxiety and stress that's manifesting in different ways. So one of the things is to just make sure that there is that temperature read before you enter into any of these kinds of competitive issues, or even whether it's a sport outside or if it's a math problem of how are you feeling right now? Is this something you can tackle? And starting to decompress before you begin with that kind of deep breathing and talking about what's the worst thing that can happen. So you miss the soccer ball, it doesn't go in. What's the worst thing that can happen here? We're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. The math problem, you don't get the math problem right. It's fine. We're going to work through that. Easier said than done with some of these little guys, but finding ways for them to find success that can translate into those areas that are challenging. It's always easier to work with a young child, especially a gifted child, in areas that they're successful, and then work into those areas where risk-taking is harder. They don't like to be challenged in ways that they don't know. And this whole experience is challenging in things that they don't know.
It's an excellent reminder. We're dealing with a lot of newness, so there could be different excitabilities popping up. I want to transition into talking about some issues that are coming up with schools. And there are several questions that I see dealing with homework, and homework being what these are my words here, I'm using this, busy work. How busy work in the classroom can be contextualized with socio-emotional connection to other students, but now that it's removed from that, how can parents help their students get through these requirements while still recognizing that it's below their abilities?
So right now, the majority of schools that are doing online learning, the teachers are stressed like everybody else doing something they've never done before. What they're pushing out is pushing out content that's probably well below the level of most of our gifted young people. And that is extremely challenging. So first thing I would say is don't let that stress you. That should not be the major thing you're thinking about right now. The major thing you should be thinking about right now is your personal well-being and mental health. Having said that, some of us just have to get that stuff done. So a lot of what we try to say and do is to figure out different ways to do that, to make it a little more interesting or a little more compelling. One of the things that I talk to our kids about doing is if you're right-handed, do all the assignments with your left hand. It's a little more interesting or challenging. Do the paper upside down, do it from the mirror so it's the other way. Try to do it in a different language. Doing different kinds of things that are creative in problem solving to make it different from just busy work, using your word, which I think is an appropriate word. And you know what? If you don't finish it, you don't finish it. What's happening right now is that many young people are stressed about what they're having to accomplish in school. And it's going to be a different experience when you go back. Just make sure you're doing the best you can and challenging your mind in the best way possible. It's hard right now, but trying to do things more creatively.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much. Also within this school context, we have another question here. There's a young girl, 12-year-old. She's struggling with social skills. She's in general education in 7th grade. Her parent says that she's really intelligent, highly sensitive, very righteous, and that can be off-putting for students. And the question is, let me read the direct question here. Hold on one moment. Her poor relatability has prevented her from getting access into a more appropriate school for gifted children. Do you have any recommendations for interventions to guide us? She has had therapy, so this is something they're working on. They're looking at ways to transition the student into something that's more fitted for her and more appropriate for her.
So the question is about dealing with the social emotional aspects and then transitioning to a new school?
It's the social emotional aspects and what to look for in a school that might be a better fit for those
Okay. So we're all gifted children across the board. One of the most important things to look for in a school that's geared this is flexibility and the ability to modify and change programming to ensure that we're meeting the individual needs of each child. In a child who has extreme sensitivities and overexcitabilities or intensities, that's really important to do in a smaller environment so that the class sizes are smaller, that the activities are done in smaller chunks of time and space, and that there is more project-based learning that really can affect that. Ensuring that there's a lot of content, that the instructors have rich content and know what they're talking about and can have that dialogue. So when those questions come up, which come up frequently with these kids that can't hold back their questions, that there is an answer for them, and then a way back to learning how to raise your hand and be part of the group. But starting with that sense of safety, of being able to stretch their mind. So those are big things, but that flexibility, the ability to accelerate when you need to accelerate, the ability to move through content quickly, and not having to do some of that busy work that's challenging. For many young people, when they are in the right environment intellectually, their social emotional skills tend to work better together. They find peers that they can communicate with, and those peers are the ones that are going to help them discover how to develop appropriate social skills. So many times these gifted young people are outside of like-minded peers and they don't have that ability to really learn how to work together in community with other people that are going to help them understand that kind of thing. It's very challenging, and I think that having a good therapist really does help, and then communication and slowly working into smaller groups of people that can work together. Creative aspects, the arts are great ways to do that as well, to bring out different aspects of a child. And then again, that physical experience helps some of that, as well as breathing. I keep saying that, but breathing and learning how to take a time out and step away from things when you need to.
Excellent. We have another parent here who's asking a similar question about choosing the right school for a student. So just to parlay off of what you were just talking about, but this time the consideration is between a private high school options for gifted students and day schools versus boarding schools. So really looking at the breadth of options and what's going to be the best fit for a student. And then this parent is also asking, what are the trade-offs between having a child stay at home for a couple more years with online or day schools versus the social aspects of having them go to a boarding school experience?
I think one of the most important things for any school that you're looking at is really to understand what the philosophy of that school is and does it match your family philosophy. There's no one right school for every gifted child, so it's hard to answer that not knowing the child, but things to consider. does this mesh with my family's philosophy, my moral character, and what we're trying to do as a family? Do they have enrichment opportunities, and do they have acceleration? Those things are equally important as well. Understanding that kids learn in different ways, and are you going to let my child do an independent project as well as direct instruction? Many gifted people need as much direct instruction as any other child, but the assumption is they're going to get it on their own. So making sure that they have that access to really good direct instruction. And how are they assessing their children? How are they evaluating? Are they ready to move on to the next level? Are they giving them that credibility to do that? And then what kind of training does the staff have? What kind of ongoing support do they have in working with highly gifted or gifted young people? And do they honor the intellect? Do they really celebrate the fact these kids are smart and celebrate the good stuff that they do and give them credibility for doing that when they may not be great in sports or in other aspects of who they are? As far as boarding and day school, it's very challenging. And right now, I think that we're going to see a different approach to the way young people go to boarding school. Many of our highly sensitive kids don't do well there. They miss home. And right now, being so connected to family, I think it's going to be a little bit different going back to a boarding school environment. But many of our kids do extremely well in boarding school environments because they're with like-minded peers that are equally excited about mathematics or social studies, and they have that ability to talk about that 24 hours a day, which is very compelling. So there's no one right answer to that. I would say that in any environment, stretching your child a little bit to make sure you have that optimal match in learning is important. So whether it's a homeschool environment or a boarding school environment, is there appropriate intellectual rigor that's not too much, but just right on that level to encourage that child to keep striving to be better and work harder in a safe environment?
So we have a question here that I think follows up on that. The question is, my daughter is 9 and in 4th grade. She's in a public school of choice. However, the district does not have a gifted program. We've met with the principal and she seems to be willing to work with us, but she keeps asking us what we want them to do with her, and we don't know how to answer that. We know she is bored and not getting the stimulation that she needs, but we don't know what the appropriate approach is. What should we be asking for is the ultimate question.
Flexibility, again, gosh, I've said that word so many times tonight. Flexibility and the ability to be able to demonstrate knowledge. So how can they allow your child to demonstrate what she already knows, doing end of chapter tests, and then moving on to the next chapter, being able to identify things that are passionate areas of study that she would like to explore, and allowing her to do that and demonstrate her knowledge base in those ways, just to try to move away from the norm of what the curriculum is. And it's wonderful as schools asking for that kind of support. There's also a lot of online resources and a lot of curriculum that can be brought into the classroom as well to help modify and encourage that. Moving up to the next grade level for a math class or another ability to move a little bit farther on or to stretch one's intellect is also very important. So really asking for the ability to demonstrate what you know and then be able to move on quickly to the next level versus having to continue to repeat things. Sometimes as much as just doing 3 of the problems on a math worksheet, or being able to do the spelling test, the last level of spelling, and move on from there. But really working towards what is that next level of engagement.
Excellent. And Betsy, just to chime in, I know Jim Delisle has written many books, one of which specifically talks about how to engage students in traditional classes. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but for those of you, I will find it included in the email after this conversation, which brings to a point. I want to share with everybody that we will be sharing out this video. It is being recorded, so please feel free to just listen, and we'll share this out later for the notes aspect.
The other thing I think to go along with that is NAGC has a wealth of knowledge, and right now they have a really wonderful website up or link up on COVID and what's happening now with gifted children. So it's a really wonderful resource to go to right now as well. And it does list other kinds of content that could be helpful for young people that are online now, but also be excellent resources for students when they go back to school. There are many things out there now as far as kits or boxes of learning that kids can order and have come into their house as far as science goes. But doing different kinds of things and working with other people, making sure you're a part of some kind of math group or math club, or doing science clubs and contests. Those are also very helpful in engaging. Computer classes, robotics, those are all really helpful in engaging and finding other like-minded peers from your community.
Betsy, this segues into a question a parent is asking. There's a two-parent household. Both parents work full-time. They have a third grader and an eighth grader who are gifted. They're both pretty much on their own, so whatever they're doing is mostly self-directed, and the parent is wondering, she's gotten a lot of resources, a lot of material, but she's wondering if there's someplace she can go that has it curated, or something that can help do the heavy lifting of making sure her kids are getting content that is useful to them. I don't know if you have any suggestions or recommendations.
Again, I would go to the NAGC website. Also, Davidson has new resources up as well that they have just published, and Hoagie's also has a lot of information as well. But in looking at the online content, the most important thing really is the instructor, the connection, is it real? Is it something that the child can connect with? Because again, we're in a situation where we want to be able to connect with our gifted young people, not just have them do that busy work, but is there a live option where they can ask questions to one another or to the other child? But really finding ways to connect is really important. And the other thing is, working families doing this is really challenging. So try to breathe yourself and realize there is no right answer to this. And there's no wrong answer. The answer is to just do your best and make sure your kids know that you care about them and that you are taking care of yourself as well. So there are lots of resources out there. There's so many. Try to just bring it in for yourself a little bit and make sure there are ways that kids can connect and keep moving through that content as best they can.
Excellent recommendation. And we're sharing some of those links in the chat, so be sure to check there and find those resources. This is going to move us into another question specifically about having that communication or that connection online. We have a parent talking about how her student is hearing from the school that the teachers are getting messages from students that they don't need the live Zoom classes or Google meetings to connect. They can do the homework on their own. And this parent is really concerned that the student isn't going to get the right socialization if they're not participating in these live programs that connect them back to the students in the classroom. So the question is, without reaching out to the school or the teacher directly, what can the parent do to help support the child and build those connections, which you partially spoke to already?
There are a couple of things, and one, it's some districts have told their teachers they only have to do a little bit of pushing out content. So some have lots of content, some have very little content. And some schools aren't doing anything at all on Zoom because they just really don't have the bandwidth to do this anymore. So there's a lot of different families in different situations. So when it comes to social connections, I really think it's important then that we really look at what other things are out there, what other enrichment opportunities are there to be able to really work in that kind of community. So if we have some classes that are the virtual labs that would provide students the opportunity to talk to one another. That's one resource. There are many other kinds of things that you really want to be able to find students that can talk to one another in a safe environment online. It's one of the things that right now is not as helpful, but when you are back in the real world, engaging in activities for gifted students in the summertime or whenever they have that chance really does give them a chance to have these connections to people all over the country. So the overnight camps or those kinds of learning environments these kids have been developing social skills online for years. And right now, all of us need to learn how to do that. So making sure you're trying to identify those other gifted resources that do provide connectivity to kids. And it doesn't have to be gifted. It could be art classes online where children are talking to other people. That's something they're passionate about. It does take a lot of work, but there are some resources out there. And again, I think that the ones we've listed, and we can list more.
Excellent. I just want to take a moment to remind everybody that if you want to ask a question, feel free to do so in the Q&A section or via the chat that we have going. I do have some more. Just a moment, Betsy. I'll get the next one on deck. So you've talked a lot about creative kids and creative instincts. And a question here from a parent is asking how to focus that energy and use it for a positive outcome. So for example, the school has gone remote for 6 weeks. So they're wondering how they can help this student not overwhelm themselves. Let me get to the question here. How can they help this creative student not overwhelm themselves with the realm of possibilities given so much uncertainty? For example, there's family out of country that they might want to see, so the question might be, when will I get to see them? Or here's a good example, when will I get to go to UNASA? What's that future going to look like? So I think the ultimate question is how to manage that creative mindset and rein it in given so much uncertainty.
So that's challenging for all of us. I think right now it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning of trying to take away that anxiety and fear and replace it with real facts and hope that there is a light at the end of the tunnel and this will end. But when it ends, things will be a little bit different. So how can we help us now look at what that looks like? How creative can we be? So many folks now have boxes that come in from whether it's Amazon or whatever else. So lots of boxes and creative things to build things in the house. So building different things, being able to have that creative outlet of poetry by cutting up magazines and creating poetry that way, or doing collages. One of the best things we can do for our young people right now is help them document and write how they feel. And this is a unique situation. And in 10, 15 years, they're going to look back on this in a very different way from their memory, from what's really happening. So being able to document that, whether it's writing or taking pictures or videos of what they're experiencing, but trying to turn it as much into a positive as possible. One of the students that I work with, who I've been talking to a lot at night of late, has been really asking those people that the child can't be in touch with to write letters to them. So those letters are now just coming in. So they're getting real live written letters from grandparents and people they couldn't see. And that has been life-changing. So switching that the other way of writing a letter to a friend on the other coast or to another country, and you'll see what you might get back again. So trying to divert that kind of creativeness in new ways of thinking and seeing. Writing a song, learning how to play an instrument, those kinds of things are really important, but any way to kind of communicate.
And I just wanted to mention, you've mentioned finding ways to channel peace a couple of times. We just had a really lovely blog post from one of our colleagues here at IEA on our IEA blog. It'll be posted in the chat in just a moment, but that's a really lovely piece that really offers some suggestions on how to cultivate peace in the chaos that we currently have. So I highly recommend reading that. And let's get into some more questions here. So this one goes back to, again, regular school, how hard it is to keep gifted kids motivated when they've got easy stuff, and how to keep them supported when they have to achieve that easy stuff. And this particular comment mentions that there's no positive trade-off like being able to socialize. I think you spoke to that earlier, but I just want to reiterate that that's a big question people are bringing up.
So is the question how to replace that now, or how to deal with it in school?
How to support the kid now, currently, in the home environment when there isn't the trade-off for doing the easy stuff like socializing with friends or getting in groups.
So again, I think that it's going back to doing as much as we can to say the most important thing is taking care of yourself in this environment. If the easy stuff is too easy and you don't want to do it, try to get through it as much as you can, answering a few of those questions for the teacher to get through that, but then looking at other things that you're passionate about and create those different venues. Being able to really delve into a book in a different way than you have before, or to as a family read something together that you can do. Time is not easy. One would think you had all the time in the world when we're all home, but somehow everyone's busier than they ever have been. So those kinds of things are challenging. But motivating in different ways. And maybe it's not motivating to complete the schoolwork the way it's supposed to be done, but maybe it's providing opportunity for doing something else that they'd like to do. Being able to talk about, when we're done, we're going to do this, or there will be an opportunity for us to build something. One of the things that we spend a lot of time with our young people on is the importance of nature and being able to go outside and breathe and be in that green space, or touch that tree, or do that creative nature art of building things in different ways. So really being able to look at things a little bit differently. The rules are not the same.
And then inversely of that, we have a question here about how can a parent help a student who wasn't doing well in school before they entered the stay home situation, but is now actually doing well academically and seems better emotionally. How can this family address this issue moving back into the classroom when we're done with the lockdown?
It's interesting. We've gotten this question from a couple of different people, because their kids were not doing well before, and all of a sudden they're doing well. What does that mean? Well, they like being home, one, and they like distance learning. Okay, we learned those things. But the translation going back into school is real. And so learning that means is it's given the child the opportunity to see success, that they are successful, they can be successful, and celebrate that. When a child is so used to not doing well in school, or not being seen or heard for who they are, they begin to think that's who they are as a human being. And that's not so. So being able to demonstrate, look what you can do. How can we help make that leap into school? And this is demonstrated work that they're going back to school with, that teachers can understand. So then helping the teachers modify instruction in such a way that can help that student learn, which is probably a little more individualized, in a little more quiet space, without the distraction of others, and understanding that they're self-motivated by doing well in that kind of environment. That might be a child that would benefit from headphones going back into the classroom because of distraction, or trying to find other ways to be successful in that regard. But really sharing honesty with the instructors when they go back. This was a successful time for my child, and I want to celebrate that.
Excellent. We have another question that came in here. Do children having anxiety related to giftedness eventually outgrow it? Is that something that you've seen through your experience?
It changes. I would dare say that the majority of gifted children have gifted parents, and many of those gifted parents have anxiety. So you kind of can judge from where you are into how that looks and feels, but it does change and it modifies. And our job is to help young people understand those anxieties and understand those intensities they have, and help them find tools to be able to regulate that in appropriate ways, to be able to understand when they're about to have a meltdown, or they're about to have a situation that they can't control. How do they adjust to that? How do they breathe? How do they remove themselves from a situation? How do they find those kinds of things that that provide them that optimism? What brings them joy? I think that's the biggest question that we can ask each other now, and this is time for a lot of our kids now, is what is it that brings you joy? And how can we help you find that joy now and in the future? And talking about what that looks like. It's not the same as happiness, but it's that inner kind of peace that we were talking about before. And that calmness, and trying to find the calm in this storm is really is a challenge.
Something that I've been hearing a lot about is parent modeling behavior and setting up schedules and modeling not traditional behaviors of good study habits and good hygiene, but now these behaviors of self-care and really making sure that somebody finds joy in their life. How can parents really model that for these kids?
So the something I think is really important is try to find in this, as you said, a schedule, some kind of routine, whatever the routine is. It doesn't have to be major and elaborate and not overdone or overthought, but routine, that the family's eating together at a certain time or doing certain things at the same space and time throughout the day in some structured manner is important. And when we all have those things that push our buttons, and our job as parents is to try to help our children find those things that push their own buttons and help them regulate that. But we also know we have our own buttons. So when we need to step away from a situation, as you said, model that and take a time out. You need to take a break, just like your child needs to learn how to take a break from a situation that's becoming overwhelming. Modeling behavior of reading, modeling behavior of doing things that you'd like your child to be able to do. Games together collectively is teaching a lot of those social skills in an environment of following rules in a play situation that does adapt to others. That's kind of role playing. A lot of what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks to months is role playing of what it's going to be like going back to a classroom setting. What is it going to be like when you still are going to the store, but things are a little different? So really looking at what that role playing could be and making a game of it.
We have another question that asks about long-term thought process, and this one is specifically around what kind of schools. Given the context of possible lockdowns in the years to come, hope not, hope this is just us getting ready, does a dedicated online school provide an advantage over other types of schools? Do you have any comments on that?
I would say probably not. I think that what we have learned, and this goes back to what is the hope and the positive of this, we've learned a lot about how to deal with these situations. Will there be another pandemic? Don't know. But will there be other things that we have to deal with? Yes. And so I think schools are learning to be more flexible, teachers are learning to be more flexible, and we're learning to be more flexible in what that environment means. I do think that what has been helpful is that teaching of how to learn online, the creation of more positive, enriching online content to be a nice partner to what happens in a real school environment is really a good match. I wouldn't say that the choice would be to stay the course of an online school just because you are afraid of what might happen in the future. I'd like to think, as you do, that we're moving to a space where community, again, is going to be a positive thing for all of our kids.
Excellent. And then we just have a couple more minutes left of this Q&A. I'm going to encourage anybody to reach back out. You can wave your hand if you want to ask a question in person. I do have 2 poll questions that I'd like to share with our audience. And audience, if you would just mind answering these, they're multiple choice or yes or no. They're fairly easy. So I'm going to launch the first poll theoretically here, just a moment. And the first poll question is, have you accessed IEA's Learning Lab series online? This is a new series that we just started launching right when we were transitioning into going into our digital space. So this is just us trying to accommodate the new reality that we're in. And we're just curious to see how many of you are engaging with that content. If at any point you have feedback on that, I'm always happy to get emails. My name is Amber McLaren, which is amclaren@educationaladvancement.org. I will also include that in the chat. So I'm just going to give it just a moment here for this poll, and then I'll wrap it up and we'll move to the next question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll now. Thank you, everybody. And 80% said no, that you haven't engaged, and 20% said yes, you have. Thank you so much for answering that question. And I don't know if the audience could tell, but this is a new option for me. So I am Learning as we go. Here we go. Question 2, launching this poll. The question is, have you or your child seen content in IEA's Instagram account, IEA Gifted? I bring this account up because we do a lot of really quick, really fun little tidbits just to keep people engaged. And I just want to see how many people are aware of what we're doing. And I'll close this in about another 20 seconds here.
I will say that these two things that we've done, many of the teachers that don't necessarily deal with gifted kids all the time are using our content in what they're pushing out to their kids as options. So it's been kind of fun to see how these great Instagram options or these great little things have sparked content and interest in our families across, not only our families, but other families across the country.
Excellent. And we had 85% say no and 15% say yes. And then I've got my final question here. And this is more just so I understand who's joining our audience. And the question is, I'll launch the poll and then I'll read it. Launching poll, there we go. What type of school does your child attend? And I recognize that there might be a myriad of other questions. So if it falls in the other, please feel free to elaborate in the chat section. I'm really curious to know what your experience is and where you're coming to us from. There's a really interesting comment from a parent here saying there's a lot of interesting stuff going on these days on Instagram and Facebook, but it's hard for kids who don't have accounts. Excellent point. Our middle school posts the feeds on their website so all kids have access without accounts. Something that IEA could consider. Excellent insight, thank you.
That's great information.
And then another person is asking if we can share links of the recording somewhere online. It's really helpful. I know I'll be sharing it with you via email, and I'll follow up in that email of whether or not we're able to share it online. And I'll definitely be sharing a lot of the links that we mentioned here. So those will be resources that you'll have available in the follow-up email. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. And it looks like 64% of you are public, and then we have a smattering across private, charter, magnet, and homeschool. Excellent. Thank you guys so much for participating in that poll. I always love to hear what is going on in your lives and communities. So thank you for that. And it's almost 7 o'clock. Any final comments for us, Betsy?
I just want to say that, one, I'm so proud of the IE team for being able to make this shift to online. We're all learning together, but we would love to hear from you more. And if you have more questions, please let us know. We can respond to you in many different ways to make sure that your questions are answered in the best way we can possibly do that, whether it's through email or any other kind of device that we can respond to you. We would really like to be able to do that.
Excellent. And then just as a final note, I want to mention that our next gifted support group is going to be on the 28th of May. Dr. Greenwood helps do consulting for colleges' applications. This is going to be a really interesting conversation given where we are currently and our changing higher ed landscape. So if you have a sophomore or a junior, possibly a senior, I would highly recommend tuning into that. Our originally scheduled speaker tonight, Ann Smith, who I accidentally combined names with Betsy earlier. She's going to be joining us down the road. We're still figuring out if that's going to be in person in the future or digitally as well. So thank you so much for your patience. We do look forward to bringing that to you guys. And as always, if you have topics that you want to cover, please feel free to send me an email. We're happy to work together to figure out what's going to best serve the community. So please have that dialogue with us. Thank you so much for joining with us. Betsy, thank you so much for joining us from your home today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Be safe and be well.
Take care, everyone.